And so tonight's presentation is titled Farmers and Rivers Working with Farmer Groups for River Restoration. And our presenter tonight is Teresa Dent, CBE, previously CEO of the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. Teresa, Teresa, originally a farming consultant with Stratton Parker, and she still works for GWCT as a coordinator for area-based conservation projects, like the Environmental Farmers Group and farm clusters. Teresa was made a CBE for services to wildlife conservation in 2015, is a fellow of RASE, was a board member of NE, chaired the Marlborough Downs Nature Improvement Area, is a director of various farmer groups, a founder member of Curlew Recovery Partnership, and an honorary member of the National Gamekeepers Association and Grasshoppers Farmer Group. So I'm very pleased to pass over to Teresa for tonight's presentation.
Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you everybody who's joined the webinar. Let me share my screen, which is always a tricky moment. Hopefully you can all see that slide. I'm going to stay in this mode as in the rehearsal when we tried to switch to slideshow mode. It didn't translate on the shared screen. So I'll stay like this. So very nice to see you all. And I've been asked to talk to you about working with farmers on river restoration. So by way of a bit of background, some of you may not have heard of the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. We are an environmental NGO, very science-based. 2/3 of our staff are scientists working in the field, and the work they do is to try and find the ways in which we can maintain and enhance wildlife alongside economic land use. So our mission is all around working with farmers and land managers. We don't have nature reserves, and our mission is to help people who own and manage their own land or rivers to make those places a better place for nature themselves. We've had a long historic involvement with farmers and gamekeepers and land managers. We started as an organisation in 1930, became a charity in 1980. In terms of rivers, we started doing river restoration research back in the late 80s, early 1990s, and a lot of that early work was on the Piddle in Dorset, and the river restoration measures ended up in agri-environment schemes that were being developed at the time and actually are still in them. We've also had a salmon and trout fisheries research team down on the River Frome at East Stoke since 2008, when we were asked to take on had been the CH Rivers Research Centre down there. And that has salmon records going back to, I think it's 1973, and it is one of the global ICES rivers. In terms of my involvement, because I came from a farming background into a conservation organisation, I've always been really interested in how we build links between conservation and farming, and how we build better bridges between the two, and how we motivate and encourage farmers to change behaviour and do a better job for nature conservation. So this evening I'm going to take you a little bit on the journey of farmer collaboration, because that is so intrinsic to the river restoration work that we're now supporting, and then explain what river restoration work these farmer collaborations that we're working with are doing. So in terms of the timeline, I think we can probably trace this back to June 2011, when the Conservatives published an environment white paper, which launched the idea of nature improvement areas. So the big areas of land and nature improvement as a concerted effort across the whole area. And I was asked by DEFRA if I could get a group of farmers to do an NIA. And sorry, there's a misprint in this slide. In September 2011, by then I'd persuaded 2 groups of farmers to enter what was a competitive process. There's 72 entries. I should have realised that in a competitive process, only 1 group of farmers would be accepted, because the other group that wasn't accepted, the lead farmer was married to my cousin. So that was a bit unfortunate, because they put a lot of work in and then they didn't get accepted. But by February 2012, the Marlborough Downs NIA was announced as one of 12 successful bids, which was a collaboration of 38 farmers. I think really the first collaboration of this kind in the country, covering 10,000 hectares, and I was asked to chair it. We learned an awful lot through that. We learned how committed and competitive the farmers would be. They wanted to be the best NIA in the country. We learned about lapwing envy. My neighbour's got lapwing. Why haven't I got lapwing? Massive motivator. We learned about how an internal market can work for environmental measures within a group of farmers, and how that can add value to outcomes. We also learned a lot of the problems. Farmers had no infrastructure to do this sort of thing. They weren't a legal entity. They had no paid staff. And no bank accounts, all of those things we had to work our way through. It took a huge amount of time. Sadly, it became clear fairly soon there wasn't going to be any funding extension. I've never really quite understood why, but there wasn't. So actually, it was the cessation of that funding for NIAs that created farmer clusters, because one of the farmers I had asked, would you like to do an NIA? And he said, no, not at all, not with all that bureaucracy, was somebody called Rob Shepherd. But he said, I would do it with my friends and neighbours. So in April the following year, we had the first meeting of his friends and neighbours in his dining room to set up what became the first farmer cluster. And we learned about the sort of social and community aspects of farmer clusters. Farmers do lead quite lonely business lives, and we had people saying, this is really nice. All I ever do is wave at you from the Land Rover. We never sit down and talk about anything, and here we are talking about corn buntings and lapwing. And so that social community side of it is very important, and also family involvement. We had children saying, Dad, how fantastic, can we do adders? I tell you, that first farmer cluster had more amphibian and reptile traps than any other farmer cluster in the country. So by that summer, DEFRA and Natural England had agreed to pilot it. So we did 5 farmer clusters on a pilot, which lasted 18 months. And almost immediately in April 2015, DEFRA launched the Facilitation Fund, which is the fund that pays for a farmer cluster to have an ecological advisor. So it was picked up very quickly by government. I don't know if these are showing on your screen. I'm sorry if they are. By a couple of years later, we set up the first super cluster. That map is the super cluster. The red bit is a national nature reserve. Some of you might know it, Martin Down. And we had 3 farmer clusters around it. So this was trying to get to bigger areas, more impactful for wildlife restoration, but all contiguous. So every single farmer in that area was in the cluster. So it was up to about 150 farmers. No, sorry, I can't remember how many farmers that was, probably more than that. And we were getting some interesting stuff emerging, like Nightingale envy. If you look at farmer clusters now, there are between 100 and 150. We don't know the exact number because it's not published, in England. We think they cover between 1 and 1.5 million hectares, and they're mainly facilitated by independent ecologists or organisations like FWAG, some by the Wildlife Trust, some by the RSPB, some by rivers trusts. I think it's quite interesting to think about that scale and think about why that conservation movement, which is what it's become, is not very well known. And I think it's because farmers do like to keep their head under the parapet. I think if there was anything else of this scale going on in terms of nature restoration, it would be all over the news. So farmer clusters proved to be and continue to be very successful as a concept. The Environmental Farmers Group is the next chapter, if you like. So environmental farmer groups are like farmer clusters. They're farmer-led, farmer-owned, bottom-up, but they are legally structured as environmental cooperatives, and they're operating at river catchment scale. Their vision is farmers protecting and enhancing nature for the public good. Their mission is to harness scale and member cooperation to secure really ambitious environmental results, but also fair financial returns for a wide range of natural capital goods and services. So this next chapter was really triggered by Michael Gove saying he was going to withdraw basic payment scheme. I worked out that in the Hampshire Avon catchment, that would remove 37 million a year from the agricultural economy. And that happens next year. It basically goes to zero. To get those best environmental results, we decided we wanted to set ourselves the target of meeting and beating the government's Environmental Improvement Plan 2023 targets. And we've grouped those into 3 sections for the farmers. So biodiversity and species recovery, cleaner water, and moving towards net carbon zero food production by 2040, and in the uplands, including peatland restoration. So we are drawing up whole catchment conservation plans for each of the EFG groups. The first one we launched was in the Hampshire Avon catchment, which is GWCT's home catchment, and that was launched in May 2022. In terms of where we are now, this map is a tiny bit out of date, but it gives you the gist. So the Hampshire Avon catchment is down here. So the dark green is the catchment boundary. The blue is the area of farmland that has joined the EFG. Then we've got one going the Test and Itchen, Meon Rotherham Way, Isle of Wight, Dorset Stour, starting up on Exmoor, Central England has got going, North Lincolnshire, and in the uplands, we've got partner groups in the Peak District, Swaledale and Wensleydale, and a new one just starting on the North York Moors. So they have spread a lot entirely through word of mouth. This is farmers ringing up saying, I hear you're doing this, ringing up another farmer, and the other farmer says, yeah, we are. Why don't you phone GWCT or phone Teresa, and they'll see if they can get one going where you are. Overall in the country, we've now got, it says 687 here, we've now got over 700 farmers and moorland managers, either as paying members or formally signed expression of interest to join. That's now over 400,000 hectares. So it's between 3.8 and 4% of England's farmed area. And of course, if you consider that each one is at catchment scale, then I suppose the area they're seeking to influence for nature restoration is actually much bigger than just the area of land they look after themselves. So going on to look at, because you're water conservators, how is this progressing in terms of river restoration? So the Environmental Improvement Plan 2023 targets are for farmers to reduce the amount of nitrates, phosphates and sediment that goes from agriculture into watercourses by 40% by 2038 compared to 2018. So trying to meet that target is one of the key parts of the conservation plan. Also, to help hit the target of 75% of our water bodies back to good ecological status, although there's no time scale to that, to protect our chalk streams, because many, as you will have seen from the map, many of our EFG are on chalk streams, and also possibly to help increase water storage. Most farmers would be quite happy to have a reservoir on their farm, although it's not always terribly easy on chalk. One project which I'll tell you about is on the River Wylye, which is one of the tributaries of the River Avon. And this project is based around what was an active and successful farmer cluster, and most of those farmer cluster farmers are now part of EFG. And this map shows 28 kilometres of the river, and they are water quality testing and sediment collecting across all of those points. Now, I could give you a short film, but I might do it at the end if Robert says we have time. I'll come back to that at the end. But the farmers have made their own film about what they're trying to do. In terms of water quality, the Wylye is a lovely river. It has one of the best populations of grayling, I understand, in the country, but it has the usual problems. So we have a sewage treatment works, which doesn't seem to necessarily get top marks. There are a lot of septic tanks on the Wylye. I was actually very shocked to discover how many. And one of the biggest villages, Codford, there isn't every house has a septic tank, and God knows when they were last renewed or anything like that. So yes, I was quite shocked at how many septic tanks on that stretch of the Avon. It is still a livestock farming area, so animal waste is an issue. There is not nearly as much livestock farming in that area as there was 30 years ago. I mean, the number of livestock farmers in the south of England compared to 30 years ago is literally a fraction of what it was. But sediment is a big issue. And that's something that our fishery scientists have been very focused on. We don't know where on the farms the sediment is coming from, but one of the things the farmers wanted to do was find that out. So they wanted to do the water quality monitoring, but also we've partnered with Rothamsted Research, and they've been helping us with a program of sediment source fingerprinting. We're working with Professor Adrian Collins on that, who's been really helpful with his team. So this is them fitting a sediment sampler into the river. You can see it's basically a drain pipe with a cone at one end. The water goes into the tip of the cone, slows down in the pipe, the sediment settles out, the water goes on through, and you peg it to the bottom of the river, which is the photograph on the right-hand side. You leave it there for 3 months, then take it out and take the soil out. And in the meantime, you have taken soil samples from anywhere along the watercourse where you think soil could possibly travel from that point into the river. And then what we've done, we've categorized it into 3 types of area: cropped area, grassland area, and riverbank area. This is a massive job. I'm not sure we really realized what a big job that was going to be until we actually started doing it, but they got it done, which is fantastic. Then once you've emptied your sediment pipe, you separate it out into sample trays, you bake it in an oven, and then you start doing this clever spectrometry which compares the sediment in the pipe with the samples that you've already fed into the machine to give you some idea of where the sediment is coming from. So we've been doing this on the Wiley for a year, and this is what we're seeing. So this is cropland. So here we've got the samples, the sediment samples from the pipe, and here we've got the samples from the soil samples taken. And you can see there isn't much crossover in terms of that spectrometry, or whatever you call it. I'm not sure quite if that's the correct word, but let's think so. So that's cropland. Next, we're looking at the channel bank, and there is more crossover. So obviously, some of the sedimentation in the river is coming from the bank, as you would, I'm sure, expect. The interesting one is this, where the grassland seems to be right at the heart of what we are finding in the river. Now, this was quite counterintuitive because I think as farmers, we all thought that probably most of the sediment was coming from arable fields because it's there that you've got bare soil at certain times of the year. They might be on a slope. They've often got an open gateway into a road, and you're getting runoff onto the road. And then as soon as it goes into a drain, it probably ends up in the river. So we were expecting the crop plan to show the most overlap. So the farmers were quite surprised to find it's actually the grassland. So now what we need to do is start doing sort of river walks that are looking at the grassland either side of the river and trying to identify for each farmer where these pathways, these soil into water pathways might be. Is it down a track? Is it from a water trough? Is it where there's erosion in a gateway? Is it old drains? What is it that's giving that pathway for soil into the water? In terms of where else farmers are doing this type of work, I mean, as you saw from the timeline, that a lot of this is very new. Although the Avon Catchment Group set up 3 years ago, we've got new groups joining all the time. But in the Hampshire Avon, we've got similar work happening on the Nadder, which is the next tributary down, the Ebble, which is the next one down, also on the Lower Avon, and also some farmers now on one of the upper tributaries, the Bourne. They came to Rivers Day we ran in June on the Wiley, and they want to start water quality testing and sediment sampling as well. We're also doing it on the Test. We hope to soon start on the Itchin. We're also now beginning to look at whole river restoration projects using the Environmental Farmers Group collaboration in a catchment. So Southern Water in the Test and Itchin catchment are very interested in working with EFG farmers to develop a much bigger scale project, essentially across the whole of those 2 rivers. And we're also hoping to get some funding for another quite big project to cover the middle section of the Froome and include the Piddle. And then in the uplands, we're not so much looking at water quality, which tends to be quite good, but we are looking at collaborative work from farmers on flood mitigation. So there are some quite interesting things happening, but it is fairly early stages. I think in terms of lessons learned, I've learned a lot about how to convene farmer groups. I've learned that farmers are actually very keen to do this sort of work. I mean, 700 farmers have volunteered through word of mouth to be part of this. They like the fact that it's bottom up, that they feel in control. They do want good advice, but they want to be able to choose who their advisors are, and they are ambitious. They are prepared to change farming systems, but they do run businesses, and they have to see a viable economic route through. That's really important. And they are looking for help and support. But I think if we can get these projects to grow and expand, they provide a real opportunity for the future. I think that's me done. Thank you very much.
So, Teresa, did you want to show the video?
Oh, yes, let me do that. Hang on, let me go back. Share window. Hang on. Let's start with a question or two, and then I'll see how I get on sharing the video.
Okay, I'm just
let me just try again now.
Okay.
I've got to get back into. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let me try.
No, you go ahead.
No, I don't think it's going to work. Sorry. Perhaps you could send it round, Robert, afterwards.
I can do, yeah, depending on the size of it. Or we can put it. We'll put it on our. We'll put it on the website with the.
Yeah, it's just a YouTube.
With the recording is
clip.
probably the
Yeah.
best thing, and then people
Okay.
can look at that. So I'm just going to stop the recording now.